So hopefully you've been thinking about some of the questions you have to ask. I jotted down a few. I think we heard some really good, some very relevant and practical experiences from the three companies we heard from. I'm going to get us started by, if I can find my notes. I have this bad habit, I write these things down and then I forget where I put them. And I'm sure it's got something to do with age. But I'm going to get very specific here. Well, actually, before I do this, let me introduce, I apologize, let me introduce our two additional panelists. We have with us to my right here, Chris DaCosta from Air Products. And then we have Thomas, yes, from Rockwell. So thank you. Thank you for joining us. Did I get everybody?
Nope, almost.
Oh, almost. Oh, damn. Don, of course. Yes, Don Bartusiak from ExxonMobil. I'm sorry. And Don's the one I know the most and I've known the longest. Isn't that terrible? Okay, so I'm going to get, okay, you have a question? 1 second. I'm going to open it with a question because I want to put them on the spot a little bit. But I'll get to you as soon as I can. The theme of this session was balancing innovation versus the need for stability. So I'm going to ask particularly the asset owners, to the extent that you're comfortable with sharing, and whatever level of detail you'd like to share, has this been an issue, and can you illustrate it by a specific example? And what I mean by an example is, have you had a situation where the innovation imperative has been prevented by stability, the need for stability, and particularly cyber stability, I guess, or any kind of operation stability, or turning it the other way around, have you ever seen a practical situation where you've seen a compromise in stability by an unmanaged change? Does anyone want to take that one?
You guys,
all
you're
jump out at once.
So I'll start real quick and I'll end real quick. So we have seen where, you know, the IoT, I need data, I need to get a number, and I need to send it to the cloud. So it's done very quickly, done by wonderful consulting firms, big consulting firm, comes in, does it, and creates a little bit of an issue. It opens a porthole and a pipe right down into our factory floor. So the intention is good, but following the proper procedures is probably an even better idea.
Yeah, Eric, I don't know if there have been any like showstoppers where we've never accomplished an innovation, but there certainly have been the cost and the path to get there. The cost has been high and the path to get there has been long because of this need to balance the innovation imperative against the cybersecurity risks. And I would say as a compelling example, that just one, in the interest of time, is the subject of how do we do above-site support of manufacturing. I mean, that's a really compelling use case that puts the internet and the connections to the internet front and center into how do you solve that problem. You know, the imperative, in all of the businesses that we're in is the unavoidable economics of the experience curve. If you're not driving unit costs down, or conversely your productivity's up, you're going to go out of business. And a big driver for us right now is how do we provide that above-site, off-premise support to manufacturing, either from internal resources or from knowledgeable third parties.
Yeah, the remote access is an age-old bugaboo, so yes.
I can answer it real quick, it's easy. VPN in, down to your DMZ, jump server down to another jump server in your OT world. It's controlled, access is controlled. You're giving, access to only the people and what they need when they need it. That's it. It's very simple. It just needs to be architected in the overall architecture.
Okay, Chris?
Yeah, so I'd share one thing. I'd say in terms of balancing the risk and trade-offs with security, one of our items is really just trying to educate our folks on there is a right way and a wrong way. So we're not saying don't implement new technology or don't innovate. We're just saying it needs to be done in a secure fashion. And most of the time they don't understand what secure fashion means, so they need some help. And I will share one circumstance where I guess it's similar to what you saw, where we actually approved an architecture for an IoT cloud application. And we saw some strange behavior on our firewalls. And when we started to look into it further, we found that the vendor who was working with us, who was hosting it in the cloud, they were downloading patches. And how are you doing that when we only gave you one way out of the firewall? Well, they had installed a VPN and basically bypassed our controls, and that's an issue that everyone will run into. So you have to be careful, even though you think you have all the protections in place. Yeah, you can run into issues again by unintended consequences. Not the way it was planned, but again, just have to be aware.
But isn't that your tool that now shows a new access out to the internet showing up on your automated tool that's watching the OT layer? So if you have the tools, it can help you pinpoint those anomalies.
Okay, we have a question from the audience back here.
Yes, the gentleman from Pfizer mentioned that the structure of his organization included about 60 people. And I think the number, I may get it wrong, was about 6 of them are your employees and the rest of them are all, 3 of them, and the rest of them are all partners. Prior to your presentation, all of the other presentations in this track from companies said that their number of employees in the security world was between 3 and 10, all right, and then partners. So what do you, for the panel, when you think about that, what do you think is the right structure? Should it be, 10% your employees?
3 is too little.
Okay, and so then the question is, with the structure like that, that's where you're so small and the partner is growing and large, how do you sell that to management? Do you have a formula for making management understand that it takes time to build your own resources, it takes time to career path them to where they want to stay, and then it's easier to get it done because it's urgent to get it done now in the structure that you chose?
Let me blow your mind even worse. Global OT for Pfizer, a very large company, is 8 people. 8. So we run extremely lean, extremely, too lean.
Yeah, so for Dow, it's a great question, and it's one, as we refreshed our manufacturing cybersecurity program, we had assets in place, and but as we realized we had work to do, what we believe is happening is we've got kind of a steady state of resources now, right? But to get to where we want to be, there's going to be a bubble of implementation. We're going to have to bring on resources. We've got to build up. We've got to get teams out there. Otherwise, we have to do it one at a time, and across 300 or 400 plants around the world, that'll take forever. Right? So what we believe is, and what I suspect Pfizer's seeing, although I won't speak for them, is sort of that bubble of getting the implementations done. Now the real question is, after you've implemented at least the base level, what's the going forward level, right? I mean, it's probably not where you are now, or at least I know it's not for Dow. It's not going to be 100 people, right? But what is that last number? And we're working through that now. It's a really good question, and we're challenged with that now. What is the right number? Now, what helps is the amount that you're able to leverage and cooperate and coordinate with your IT security people. So suddenly you've got a much larger organization that's been established, doesn't know the OT environment, but is very, very skilled at helping understand kind of cyber threats. And so the more you can leverage that and keep the specific domain knowledge in your shop, but leverage what they can do, right, with security operations and some other stuff, you're at an advantage going in. So that's, but I don't have a discrete answer for you because we are looking at that end state and we're not sure where we're going to end up yet.
Yeah, I would add, and I'm just going to speak generically, but developing people strategies also so that you can cultivate a cross-pollination of OT skills with some of the IT skills, I think is very important as well, because there's not a lot of those out there. And I think that's a very deliberate people strategy that has to be evaluated so that you're developing the capabilities that you need to sustain all this great work that's being done. And that people strategy, it needs to be deliberate so that the individuals understand where they're going on a career progression, and they see value in that, and they're passionate about that, and they're getting the experiences and exposures that they need along that path.
Any other questions from the audience? You can always count on Sid. Sid always has a bunch of questions.
Hi, everyone. Surprisingly, it's not a cybersecurity question.
Good.
It's really, you know, I was part of the group that developed this session, and one thing I'm very interested in is, in the end, I believe it, everything I've heard, most of the people saying, was more saying, if you want to innovate, make sure you do it securely and safely. And obviously, I mean, to me, I applaud that, of course. But I think there are times, you know, I think most people in cybersecurity will say, you can't be absolutely sure you can block everything. So when you innovate, you are going to take a risk. And certain things, particularly some of the new IoT stuff, new platforms of industrial control systems, things, as you implement those, you want to do it, but there has to, my question's more around the trade-off, as opposed to a hierarchy. I mean, what I've been hearing is more like a hierarchy saying, well, you can only innovate if you're sure it's secure and it's safe. And sometimes you have to say, well, how secure is secure enough to balance the benefits that I'm over here getting? You know what I mean? It's like a balancing thing. And I'm just trying to get a sense if any of you have a way to do that. I mean, how much of a benefit, I mean, if you're going to implement something that's going to save a plant, increase productivity by 5%, which I'm sure would be an enormous number for many people, are you willing to take a little bit more risk? How do you balance that? I'm just wondering if you have any methodologies for that or anything.
One element that was talked about is that getting that visibility into the OT space. When you think about that, if you get visibility, you know now where your data lives. So not only do you know how to secure it, but you know how to access it. So that visibility gives you security so that you can secure the assets because you know what's vulnerable. But you also then know what protocol they may be speaking, what type of device it is, what type of thing it's doing. So now you can use that in your digital side to say, now we know how to get data out of that to help with the analytics.
I'll even couple with that. So hopefully everyone has a reference architecture you're working from for all your plants. So you're building that in, and you have a zone. You know, you're talking about zones. You have an IoT zone, and the IoT zone's for monitoring. And I can put any sensor in there and plug it in at any time. And that IoT zone is intended to go where? Probably to the cloud. If that data traffic doesn't go to the cloud from that secured zone, then that's a concern. And if you're monitoring for that, then you attack that risk. But there is nothing, even getting up and going to work is a risk. So there's always a risk. And it has to be managed, and it has to be, you try to control it, and you try to monitor, and you try to protect. But nothing is perfect.
So Sid, I think we're still, we have a lot to learn about how do we quantitatively assess and manage risk of a cybersecurity nature. You know, we're pretty adept at managing quantitatively process safety risks. So, and there's a body of literature out there in managing cybersecurity risks that I'm not prepared to speak to today. But as an example, I think we should look at the financial industry. Just consider what that industry has done. You go back into the 1990s and the 2000s, and every one of us experiences this. What we can do with electronic securities tradings, what we can do with online banking. Those innovations came at us with cybersecurity risks as part of the innovative process. That industry has achieved probably a higher degree of maturity with respect to managing cybersecurity risks than we have to learn.
I would agree.
So the only thing I'll add to that is how many people are irritated by all the multi-factor authentication to get to your bank account. So one of the tricks is going to be, part of that maturity to me is going to be helping our operational people understand they can't do things, they may not be able to do things exactly the way they did it before. There's going to be extra steps. Now, we need to get out of the way of stuff that's critical to operations, where they have to respond quickly. But for kind of the general upkeep and how we run and you know, getting into systems, right? I mean, we just need to establish the mindset that those things are not there to irritate you. They're there to protect you and make sure that the plant keeps operating reliably, right? Which is the, you know, the big concern from an operating point of view, right? Cybersecurity is a reliability issue, along with a bunch of other things. So we may not be able to get access the way we used to. You may not be able to do the things the same way. Now, I believe all the capabilities will still be there, but there's going to be some extra things that you might have to do.
So the irritation is a fringe benefit, right? Okay. One comment, and we have a question from back here, but I'm just going to interject another comment here, a serious comment this time. I think that the other thing that, based on my experience, we talk about cybersecurity as having rules. There are rules and there are principles, right? And you need to explain the principles as well as the rules. And it's just like safety. You know, people need to understand where the rules come from. They're based on solid principles. And in the security space, arguably, in some situations, it may be, and I stress the word may, be okay to maybe, you know, bend the rules slightly, but you do not violate principles. And I think that that's important. That's an important distinction to make with people. And with that, the speaker or the questioner back here in the corner.
Yeah, my name is Mark Duck with Shell. I think Jim answered part of my question. I was going to ask about, okay, innovation probably involves IoT these days, and we want to be able to support that. So we've kind of evolved our model to have exactly what you said, an IoT zone. But one of the other factors that we're maybe pondering is that sensor data, you know, goes up into the cloud, you apply analytics to it, you get some value, and then it's used somewhere. Maybe it's used, you know, on the top floor. Or maybe it goes back down into what we call the IECS zone to the operator. But, and so managing that feedback loop back into the IECS zone, you know, what are your thoughts on managing that part of that loop?
So if we see value with IoT where we want to close back, that asset or sensor moves from the IoT zone into the controlled zone, and it's a feedback loop down into the control system if there's value in that data. So, you know, if you see that value and you really, you know, it makes sense to, you know, you're getting business value from that IoT sensor, then great, use it. But now we're not talking to the cloud though anymore, right? You got a separate sensor, you now know its value to the process, and now you have another sensor or whatever that's tied and closed looped into your control environment. So indirect is fine, right? So even my rule set, I said that the plant floor doesn't talk directly. So yes, I'm mincing with words a little bit. So we do talk to the internet, but it's through the DMZ, through scanning and an extra hop and a skip to get to the internet. But there's no direct pipeline that talks out to the internet. And that's why my friends in AT&T, sorry, we're not using, you know, the cell modems and that cell connections. So 5G is a good question. I throw it out to everyone. What do we do with 5G? I haven't figured that one out yet.
Yeah, just a quick add with IoT. There's traditional ways of getting sensors into a DCS, into your historians. One of the reasons we're looking at IoT is because it's cheaper and it's easier, there's no wiring, but it adds all this additional risk, and you have reliability and all these other issues that come along with it. We push our teams to say, give me the business case why you want to do this via IoT technology, right? So if the business case is strong enough, we'll just wire it in. And now we have a reliable supply, and now I don't have to create an IoT zone.
A general principle when you think about analytics is do the analytic where it makes sense to do it. If you're pulling everything to the cloud just because you can, I mean, there are analytics you can do just at the level 0, level 1. You don't need to get that data all the way to a data lake in IT to make a decision and then change control parameters in your system. So do the analytic where it makes sense to do the analytic. That can be a security principle as well as a productivity principle.
We have another question here. I think this may be our last question because we got about 3 minutes left before our time's up.
We'll go quick. You just segued me beautiful into where I was going. I'm a IT security guy, have been for years on the IT side versus the OT, although some of both. As we're all attempting to address this shortage of security professionals, I like what someone said a moment ago. I personally don't think we have a shortage of people who say they do security. I think we have a shortage of qualified people who can apply their knowledge in useful ways. But one of the ways that we're getting past that in the IT security side of the house more and more is through the use of or machine intelligence, AIs, the data lakes, all those capabilities. Are you guys, I mean, given that in the OT environment you're doing more with less, you've got systems that they generate certain kinds of information, not necessarily the plethora of, overabundance of alerts that all the IT systems, but are you guys starting to, when working with IT, is getting integrated into the data lakes, the AI, the machine intelligence, is that something that you guys are starting to see some pickup on? I mean, I'm still seeing IT departments that, oh yes, we're going there, we'll win. We have no idea when we're going to be brave enough to plug into that in the first place. I'm just wondering if is that something you're seeing in the OT market where people are adopting that more rapidly just out of a ease of functionality sake versus a lot of the IT guys who seem to have a fear that the minute I turn this over, I'm now outsourced by an AI machine and I'm no longer needing a job. That seems to be a fairly common assumption.
I'll say it very quickly. IT and OT working together, that's the solution. Anybody doing a digital transformation just IT based, there's a problem. And the problem isn't knowledge and being smart. The problem is the experience base and understanding the environment you're going to work in. So if you couple the skills and strengths of IT and OT together, complementary, that's a great, great marriage.
And your specific question about AI, machine learning, so the advantage we have on the OT side is it's not mature yet, right? And so we're growing. And so I can tell you our position, right, at Dow is to, one, partner with IT, but take advantage of, do we really need to, like I talked about that steady state staffing level, does that need to represent, all the knowledge and all the domain expertise we need to have in people, or can some of that be embedded in the systems, right? Can that domain knowledge start to go into those systems? So that is, we're doing both things at the same time, and so it makes it hard to predict where the number of people will be, but we'd be, in my opinion, right, we'd be foolish not to take advantage if there's some ways that we can embed knowledge, and at least for the more routine, right, kind of threats that you want to start looking for, so.
Okay, I think we're out of time, and those of you that know me know that I try to end on time. So we're now moving into the break till 4 o'clock, and then it'll be the last session of the day. So thank you very much for attending. I hope you learned something, and thank you to my speakers and panelists.